Welcome! My name is Rhonda Parker, and I am the wordslinger, game enthusiast, and mastermind behind Words by Parker. If this is your first visit, welcome, and if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Today on the channel, I want to share with you a short story that I wrote that became the inspiration for the steampunk novel series that I'm getting back to working on this year. So, as you may already know, one of my goals for 2022 is to finish the first draft of the first novel in my steampunk series. And there's planned for 4 novels. Don't plan for more than that, but that the 4 novels is the current plan. And the series is tentatively titled The Steam Empire. And I wrote the short story that I'm going to read to you today as a creative project for one of my classes for my English degree back in 2014. So I've had this idea for a while. The characters and the ideas and the scenarios are clawing their way out of my head. So this is the year I got to work on this. And I thought it might be fun to look back at what started it all. Plus, it's good for me. I can reacquaint myself with what I was thinking, but it's also good for me in that I can share this with you all. So, without further ado, The Clockwork Cross, Prologue to the Steam Empire series by Rhonda Parker. The lesser fog of London rolled in quiet and thick after the rain, covering the city in a grayish-green haze. The orbs of gaslights hung like miniature suns illuminating paths and streets. It was shortly before midnight in Victoria's City. Most of the sensible residents were tucked away in their houses and mansions. The less respectable or the less privileged ones were still conducting their business or planning for the next day's work. Horses' hooves clip-clopped on the cobblestones. Now and again, voices and varied emotions could be heard from the pubs and along alleys. In a quiet like this, anyone could get lost, which is what the shivering young woman in the darkened warehouse wanted. Cold white moonlight shone in through the window she cowered beneath and illuminated the floor in front of her. The light was strangely bright, yet it did not reach into the shadows where she was hidden, and for that she was grateful. She didn't want to see herself, much less let anyone see her after what happened earlier. Her clothes didn't reflect her membership in one of London's oldest engineering families. The dark gray pants and brown boots were certainly not part of a lady's wardrobe. A burgundy blouse covered what her dark brown and brass-buckled corset did not. Great heaving sobs came from her medium frame. The sobs were quiet. If she had been allowed to make all the noise she could create from the turmoil within her, the city of London would be woken from its sleep. She drew her knees up to her chest, tears continuing to spill from her blue-green eyes. Gradually, the young woman's sobs began to lose their strength, and an odd calmness infused her as her intellect took over. She was no hysterical woman caught in fevered imaginations. She was Grace Washington, a bright and promising student engineer at the Design and Machining Institute just outside of London. One of the brightest, Headmaster Jameson had said. In fact, she had already been approached by the Machination Guild with a rather handsome offer once her studies were complete. Graduation was a month away, or had been until a few hours ago. Her now calm hands started twisting through her light brown hair, quickly braiding it down the side of her head, as she usually did when she was deep in thought. As soon as the braid was done, she ran her fingers through her hair and pulled it loose, then began again. She was trying to process more information than usual, and keeping her hands busy helped her focus. She was starting on the 20th braid when the bell in the clock tower at Westminster chimed midnight. She could hear it far away across the city, and the chimes seemed to snap her out of her reverie. Her hands stopped mid-braid. A thought had come to her. Maybe if I write it all down. Her whispered voice seemed like a shout in her ears, but anyone walking outside the warehouse would have attributed it to the scramble of rats inside the building. She finished the braid and then delved into her hastily packed bag. She had packed only what she thought she might need, only what would sustain her in the attempt to leave the city under cover of darkness. But there were 2 things in the bag she knew that she wouldn't have been able to leave behind, no matter what. She lifted out her new journal, bound in tan brown leather and wrapped with a rawhide thong. It was an early graduation gift to herself, and she had often thought about all the ideas she would be able to capture and flesh out, ideas that would improve the lives for so many people. That dream was lost to her now. She shook her head and reached back into the bag. This time, she found a mechanical pen. She looked at the pen for a moment. It was based on one of her first designs at the Institute. The pen needed no inkwell. A small cartridge was attached to the top, and ink would run down from the reservoir to feed the pen tip below at the click of a small button on the side. The design was hers. The mechanics were her brother's. Grace choked back another sob and knew that this was only one of the painful memories of the recent past that would have to be suppressed if she was to survive outside the protection of her family and the Institute. Theodore Washington was 2 years younger than his sister, but Teddy thrived on her attention and encouragement instead of ran from it. The two siblings could have been twins, but for the color of his gunmetal gray eyes and the 3-inch difference in their heights. They were inseparable playmates, and when Teddy began to show a natural talent for machining, he and Grace were a perfect team. She could design machinery more complex than the inside of a pocket watch, and he could build from any design she gave him, often improving her design with an element she hadn't considered. It was each sibling's gift to be able to enhance the ability of the other. Their amazing devices and machines were known across the Institute as the Washington Projects. The pen was the project that got Teddy into the Institute. It was also the project that caught the attention of the Machination Guild. Now she had pen, paper, and light. All she needed to do was write. A single tear raced down her cheek, and the pen in her hand began to move. 15 September 1859, midnight. I remember the day Teddy was chosen for the Institute. I had been interning there for a few weeks when I brought the pen to the laboratory and showed my supervisor. He praised the design and the build of it, and quickly sent for Lord Mansfield, the patron and benefactor of the Institute. It was his job to represent the Institute and its work to outside interest, including to the Crown. "Marvelous work, Miss Washington," he said, turning the pen this way and that, watching as the tiny gears turned to open the pathway between the ink reservoir and the pen tip. "And you say your brother helped with this?" "In the build, my lord. He has a true gift for machining." He seemed to think for a moment. "Certainly fine work. How old is your brother?" "Just turned 18 a week ago, my lord, but he hasn't taken his final exams in steam theory yet." I didn't want to boast, but I was sure that Teddy would have no problems passing his exams. The thoughtful look returned as Lord Mansfield handed the pen back to me. "Thank you, Miss Washington. Perhaps I could call on Theodore at your family's home and speak with him about his future plans." I was gleeful internally. I hoped the huge grin I felt only came out as a smile. "I am sure that can be arranged, my lord." So it was that Lord Mansfield came to our residence in West London and supped with us one evening. Our parents were honoured by his visit, and even more honoured than when he asked their permission to bring Teddy to the Institute if his schoolwork was deemed satisfactory. "For you see," he told our parents, "I know your daughter's talent for designing, and if her brother's talent for machining is half of hers, the Institute will be able to provide better and more helpful machines to the people of Britain. Our work is important to the health and safety of the future empire." As I knew he would, Teddy passed his exams with flying colours, and soon he and I were both working for the Design and Machining Institute. We worked on projects separately, but the ones we were able to complete together were some of my favourites. Fortune had smiled on us, and the world was our steam-powered oyster. The machines we worked on were helping people across the British Empire. It was a heady and satisfactory feeling. A few weeks ago, I was working on a new design, the third request in as many weeks. Geoffrey Edwards, a fellow apprentice, brought in the morning's newspaper. "Grace, did you see the headlines this morning?" He handed me the newspaper, and my brow quickly furrowed. A railway accident had taken the lives of 14 people, and the train had been equipped with a new positioning mechanism, one that had been requested as a favour for Lord Mansfield. I scanned the article for any mention of what happened, and it seemed that the mechanism that was meant to contract at certain points on the track had actually expanded, causing the train to derail. I walked down to the machining laboratory, newspaper in hand. Teddy was standing there behind his workbench. I showed him the article. "That's terrible." He took a closer look at the paper. "Teddy, that's our design and build. Something happened to the final product." His grey eyes widened. "But I followed your revised specifications exactly." Now I was confused. Revised specifications? "Yes, Grace." Teddy turned to his file cabinet and pulled out a folder. "I found it on my workbench with a note from Nicholas Wakefield that you needed the prototype as soon as possible." He opened the folder and I couldn't believe my eyes. My design had been modified. It was a small change, something only a master designer or builder would notice. But it was just enough to cause the supposed malfunction. "Teddy, according to this schematic, the mechanism on the train worked properly. But that's not how I drafted it." That's when I took my case to Lord Mansfield. He listened to my complaint and read the file, and seemed concerned himself. "I don't know how this happened, Miss Washington," he said sincerely. "Please believe me that I will have Professor Turner of the engineering department look into this." He looked at me gravely. "You're sure that someone altered your design?" "I am convinced of it, my lord." He nodded and then sighed deeply. "Very well. If you will please excuse me, I have some business with the press today about this unfortunate incident." I thanked him and returned to the design laboratory. In the weeks that followed, Professor Turner followed up on my complaint, and suddenly the focus of his investigation shifted to me. The administrators of the Institute were convinced that I had caused the malfunction knowingly, ruining my reputation in addition to jeopardizing my brother's. Their argument was that I was overwrought, and that so many projects had been placed on me that I just couldn't handle it anymore. My suspicion is that they were discrediting my story in an effort to silence me. According to them, I needed help. Teddy vouched for me to the administration and anyone else who would listen. At first it seemed like some of our fellow students were on our side, but then nobody would listen. Teddy's belief in me still seemed solid, but one night even that changed. "Grace, maybe you do need a rest." His brow was furrowed, and his eyes betrayed his pity for me. "You have been working very hard lately." Something in his tone unsettled me. "I'm fine. I've never had a problem with hard work before. Deadlines and pressure either. They don't faze me. You know this." "But anyone can make a mistake under pressure and stress. Maybe you—" "Teddy?" I hesitated to ask him what I feared was true. "You still believe in me, right?" He wouldn't look me in the eye. "Grace, I want to. It's just—" He paused before the dam broke and more words flowed from his nervous mouth. "Well, Lord Mansfield and Professor Turner think you need a rest, that's all, and you have been working hard." He sat down on his bed and hung his head. My world shattered. They had even convinced my brother that I was crazy. Oh, they said a rest, but that was just another way of saying they were sending me to Bedlam. I ran to my room, grabbed what items I could, and made sure to take any designs and prototypes with me. I wasn't about to see anything else altered to hurt someone. So here I am, a fugitive with nowhere to go and only the clothes on my back. But somehow I don't think this is the first accident to occur. I think there is more going on than meets the eye, and I think the Machination Guild may be responsible. But how can I find out the truth when I have no allies? I cannot bring my brother into this without risking his safety, but I must keep him away from the guild at all cost. Something odd is going on. The clock in the tower told the hour of 4. Grace stopped. Her hand was cramped from the intensity and speed of her writing, and the second ink cartridge was mostly spent. The journal that was going to contain all her new ideas and dreams would now hold everything she could learn about what was really going on with the Institute and the Guild. I have to consider myself the first rebel in a new and as yet unknown war, she said softly to herself. And I have to find a way to break Teddy out of the guild's influence, no matter what it takes. As she packed away her things, a sharp piece of metal stuck her hand and she gasped. Drawing it out, she saw the Clockwork Cross that had been given to her on her 18th birthday. Her parents designed it, and Teddy built it. The cross itself was made entirely of gears and clock pieces attached to cross beams of polished brass, and yet it looked as beautiful as one made from gold or silver. Teddy crafted it so that the gears would move. She slipped the chain over her head and tucked the pendant into the front of her blouse. Quickly, the young woman packed away her things and carefully made her way into the foggy London streets, a fugitive from all she knew and from everyone she loved. As of that moment, Grace Washington ceased to exist. So that's it, the introduction to my Steam Empire series. And I know a lot of this is probably going to change. Actually, I know some of this is definitely going to change. Just know that this takes place about roughly 20 years before the actual events of the first novel. So I'll leave you with that bit of information. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, please click on the like button. If you didn't, click the dislike button. If you have a comment, question, you want to leave some feedback, please do so in the comment section below. And if you want to see more content from me, make sure you hit that subscribe button and then tap the bell icon to get notifications. Thank you again for being here and for taking the time to listen to me tell one of my stories, and I will talk to you again soon.